Black Widow spends New Year's Eve alone. Her untold story of racism stuns the neighborhood. On a quiet suburban street, the festive glow of New Year's Eve fills the air. Houses shine with twinkling lights, the sound of laughter spills from open windows, and families rush back and forth, preparing to ring in the new year. But one house stands out among the cheer, dark and silent, like a forgotten note in an otherwise harmonious song. Inside, Martha Brown sits in her worn armchair by the window, the faint flicker of a candle casting shadows on the room's tired walls. At 80 years old, Martha has seen many New Year's Eves come and go, but tonight feels different. Her hands, marked by a lifetime of hard work, rest in her lap, clutching a small photo of her late husband, Henry. The house is still, save for the quiet hum of the heater and the occasional crackle of the candle's flame. Outside, the world carries on without her. Neighbors bustle past, carrying trays of food or clinking glasses filled with champagne. Martha watches as car doors slam, children giggle, and fireworks begin to burst in the distance. It's a scene she's observed many times before, but tonight she feels its weight more deeply. For decades, Martha has been part of this neighborhood, a steady presence on the corner lot. She's watched children grow into adults, witnessed countless seasons come and go, and maintained her home with quiet pride. But despite the years, Martha has remained a mystery to most. Neighbors know her as the elderly widow who waves politely from her porch, but little else. Few have stopped to ask about her life, about the struggles she's endured, or the loneliness that has slowly crept into her days. Tonight, as the clock inches closer to midnight, Martha reflects on the years she spent with Henry, the man who made her laugh, who held her hand through the hardest times, and who taught her to hope even when the world seemed unkind. Together, they faced challenges that many would find unimaginable. Moving into an all-white neighborhood in the 1970s, raising their children amidst whispers and glares, and enduring the subtle but unrelenting weight of racism. Henry's optimism kept them going, but since his passing, Martha has felt the light inside her dimming. Across the street, the lights from Laura's home catch Martha's eye. Laura, a young mother of 3, is a relative newcomer to the neighborhood. Martha has seen her countless times, rushing to load her kids into the car or decorating her yard for the holidays. But like most of the neighbors, Laura has never ventured beyond a polite wave. Tonight, however, as Laura glances out her window, her gaze lingers on Martha's dark, quiet house. "Why haven't we ever invited her over?" Laura asks her husband as she places a tray of cookies on the counter. "She keeps to herself," he replies. "Maybe she likes it that way." But something tugs at Laura, a nagging thought she can't shake. She looks back at the house, wondering what Martha's life must be like, especially on nights like this. While the neighborhood bursts with joy and celebration, Martha's home feels like a world apart, lonely, forgotten. The scene sets the stage for a story that goes deeper than holiday cheer. A story about the unseen lives of those who have quietly endured, those whose stories remain untold. It's a reminder that every dark window holds a life, a past, and a voice waiting to be heard. If you're watching this, you're already part of something bigger, a community that values connection, understanding, and the power of sharing untold stories. Stay with us, because Martha Brown's story is one you won't forget. And it might just change the way you see the world around you. Later that evening, Martha sat at her small kitchen table, her simple dinner untouched in front of her. She glanced at the empty chair across from her, where Henry used to sit, his booming laugh filling the room as they shared stories from their day. The silence now was deafening. She picked up her fork, but couldn't bring herself to eat. Instead, she stared at the flickering candle in the center of the table. The same candle she lit every New Year's Eve to honor Henry's memory. Outside, laughter and music filtered in through her window. Martha stood slowly, making her way back to the armchair by the front window. From there, she could see the glow of holiday lights and the shadows of neighbors moving back and forth, busy with their celebrations. She sighed and wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, resigning herself to another night of watching the world move on without her. Across the street, Laura stood by her own window, her eyes fixed on Martha's darkened house. Something about the quiet stillness of it gnawed at her. She thought about her own mother, who lived alone in another state, and how much she worried about her being lonely, especially during the holidays. The thought of Martha spending New Year's Eve by herself felt wrong. Turning to her husband, Laura said, "I'm going over there." "With the kids?" he asked, surprised. "No," Laura replied, grabbing a plate of cookies from the counter. "Just me. I think she deserves some company." As Laura made her way across the snowy street, she felt a flutter of nervousness. What if Martha didn't want visitors? What if she was intruding? Still, something in her heart told her she had to try. Martha was startled by the knock at her door. It was so rare for anyone to visit that her first thought was that something must be wrong. She shuffled to the door and opened it cautiously, surprised to see Laura standing there, smiling nervously with a plate of cookies in hand. "Good evening, Mrs. Brown," Laura said warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Martha blinked, unsure of how to respond. "Not at all," she said finally. Come in. Come in. It's too cold to be standing out there." Laura stepped inside, immediately noticing how tidy the house was, though it felt frozen in time. The furniture was old but well kept, and the walls were lined with photos of a life that seemed so full and vibrant. She spotted a wedding picture of Martha and Henry, their smiles radiant, and a collection of photos of children and grandchildren. Yet, the quiet house felt lonely, as if the life in those photos had been locked away with time. "I brought some cookies," Laura said, setting the plate on the table. "I thought you might like some company." Martha smiled, a flicker of warmth breaking through her guarded demeanor. "That's very kind of you," she said softly. "It's been a while since anyone stopped by." As they sat together, Laura asked gentle questions about Martha's life, wanting to know more about the woman she'd passed by so many times without really seeing. At first, Martha hesitated, unsure how much to share. But something about Laura's kind eyes and genuine interest made her feel safe. She talked about her children, now grown and living far away, busy with their own families. She shared stories about Henry, how he used to sing her favorite songs while cooking breakfast, and how they danced in the living room on New Year's Eve. Her voice grew softer when she spoke about the struggles they had faced as one of the first black families in the neighborhood, about the whispers, the cold stares, and the acts of subtle but painful exclusion. "I remember one year," Martha said, her gaze distant, "we tried to host a block party. Henry thought it would help us feel like part of the community. Only 2 families came. The rest, well, they just said they were busy." She gave a small, sad smile. "After that, we stopped trying so hard." Laura felt a pang of guilt. She thought about the times she'd seen Martha in her yard or at the mailbox and had waved but never stopped to talk. She wondered how many others in the neighborhood had done the same. "Martha," Laura said softly, "I had no idea you and your husband went through so much. You've been here longer than any of us, and yet we've done so little to show you that you're part of this community." Martha shrugged, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "It's just the way things are sometimes. People don't mean to forget. They're just busy living their own lives." Laura reached across the table and placed her hand on Martha's. "But that doesn't make it right. You shouldn't have to feel invisible. Not after everything you've done." Martha looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. For so long, she had accepted her isolation as the natural order of things. But hearing someone acknowledge her pain, someone who seemed to truly care, made her feel a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. When Laura left that evening, her mind was racing. She couldn't stop thinking about everything Martha had shared, about her struggles, her resilience, and the life she had quietly built despite the challenges. Laura felt an overwhelming urge to do something, to make things right, not just for Martha, but for the community that had failed to truly see her for so long. The next morning, Laura began making calls. She reached out to neighbors, asking what they knew about Martha and sharing what she had learned. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. A woman who had faced decades of quiet discrimination, but had never let it harden her heart. Laura's words stirred something in the neighbors, many of whom admitted they had never thought much about Martha's life or the sacrifices she had made to stay in the neighborhood. "She deserves more than this," Laura said firmly. "We need to show her that she's not alone." And so a plan began to form, a plan to bring the neighborhood together in a way that hadn't happened in decades, all to honor the woman who had been its quiet cornerstone for so long. The plan unfolded quietly at first, with Laura working behind the scenes to organize something special for Martha. She enlisted the help of neighbors, sharing stories of Martha's life and the struggles she and Henry had faced as pioneers in the community. Some neighbors were hesitant at first, unsure of how to approach Martha after years of distance, but Laura's passion was contagious. One by one, they began to pitch in. "I had no idea she went through all that," said Mr. Daniels, who had lived on the street for nearly as long as Martha. "We should have done more for her years ago." Laura nodded. "We can't change the past, but we can do something now." They decided on a surprise brunch to be held on New Year's Day, right in Martha's front yard. Families volunteered to bring food, flowers, and decorations. One neighbor offered to string lights across the yard, while another donated a long table for everyone to gather around. As word spread, more neighbors joined in, eager to show their appreciation for the woman who had been quietly living among them for decades. On the morning of New Year's Day, Martha woke to the sound of laughter and voices outside her window. She pulled back the curtain and gasped. Her front yard, usually so quiet, was bustling with activity. Neighbors were setting up tables, arranging flowers, and carrying trays of food. Children ran back and forth, their laughter ringing through the crisp winter air. Martha opened the door, unsure of what to say. Laura was the first to approach her, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers. "Good morning, Mrs. Brown," Laura said with a warm smile. "This is for you." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "What's all this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's a celebration," Laura said. "For you. For everything you've done for this community. Even when we didn't show you the gratitude you deserved." One by one, neighbors came forward, sharing their own words of appreciation. A young woman named Sarah spoke about how Martha had once helped her son when he fell off his bike near her house. "You didn't just bandage his knee," Sarah said. "You made him feel safe." I'll never forget that. An older man, Mr. Daniels, stepped forward next. "Martha, I owe you an apology," he said. "When you and Henry moved in, I wasn't welcoming. I was caught up in my own ignorance, but you've shown nothing but grace over the years, and I'm so sorry it took me this long to say it." Martha stood in the middle of it all, her hands clasped tightly in front of her as tears streamed down her face. For years, she had felt invisible, forgotten. Now, she was surrounded by people who finally saw her, not just as the quiet widow on the corner, but as a woman who had lived, loved, and contributed so much. As everyone sat down to eat, Martha was encouraged to share a few words. She hesitated at first, overwhelmed by the outpouring of kindness, but then she took a deep breath and stood. "I don't know what to say," she began, her voice shaking. "For so long, I thought I was just here, that maybe I didn't matter all that much to anyone anymore. But today, you've shown me that I wasn't forgotten." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the faces of her neighbors. Henry always believed in this neighborhood, even when it wasn't easy for us. He used to say that change doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, like planting seeds and waiting for them to grow. I think he'd be proud to see this today. The crowd erupted in applause, and Martha felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. She felt part of something bigger, something meaningful. The rest of the day was filled with laughter, stories, and a newfound sense of connection among the neighbors. Children played in the snow, families exchanged kind words, and Martha sat at the head of the table, her heart full as she listened to the sounds of joy around her. As the sun began to set, Laura leaned over to Martha and said, "You've done more for this neighborhood than you know, Mrs. Brown. This is just the beginning." Martha smiled, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, dear. I think Henry was right. Change does take time, but it's worth it." When the last of the neighbors left that evening, Martha stood at her window once more. But this time, she didn't feel like an observer. She felt part of the vibrant world outside, a world that had finally embraced her as one of its own. This wasn't just a celebration of one life. It was a new beginning for an entire community. And as Martha turned away from the window and blew out her candle, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope for herself, for her neighbors, and for a brighter, kinder future. As the golden light of the setting sun faded into the chill of the evening, Martha sat in her armchair once more, her heart brimming with emotions she hadn't felt in years. Her once quiet home, where loneliness had settled like dust, had been transformed, filled with the sound of laughter, the warmth of kind words, and the presence of neighbors who had finally taken the time to see her. For decades, Martha had lived in silence, her contributions unnoticed, her life invisible. But today, the silence had been broken, and with it, a part of her that had been dormant for so long came alive. Across the street, Laura stood by her window, watching the soft light glow from Martha's house. She thought about everything Martha had shared, the battles she and Henry had fought, the isolation they had endured, and the quiet grace with which she had carried on. "It's incredible," Laura said, turning to her husband. "We all saw her, but none of us really saw her." Her husband, leaning against the doorway, nodded thoughtfully. I think we're all guilty of assuming someone else will take the first step, he said. But when no one does, people like Mrs. Brown get left behind. Laura sighed, looking out into the night. We can't let that happen again, she said. Not to her, not to anyone. That night, as Martha sat by the flickering light of a candle, she looked around her home with fresh eyes. The table was still adorned with flowers from the brunch, and a handwritten card sat beside her, signed by the neighbors who had once been strangers. She thought of Henry, his deep laugh, his unshakable faith in their community. She whispered softly, "You were right, Henry. It just took time." But this wasn't just about her. For the first time, Martha realized her story had the power to ripple outward, to inspire others to reach beyond their comfort zones and connect in ways they hadn't before. Her life, though quiet, had been a testament to resilience, kindness, and the strength to endure. And now, it was becoming something more. A beacon. The next morning, Laura woke with a renewed sense of purpose. She opened her laptop and began typing a post for the community's social media page. She shared Martha's story, not just her struggles, but her quiet courage and the grace with which she had faced years of being overlooked. She ended the post with a heartfelt plea. As we step into this new year, let's take a moment to think about the people around us. The neighbors we wave to but don't know. The family members we've drifted away from. The friends we haven't called in too long. Let's make this the year we change that. If you know someone who might be spending New Year's or any day alone, reach out. Invite them over. Visit them. Let's create a community where no one feels invisible. Within hours, the post began to gain traction. Comments poured in, not just from neighbors, but from people across the city who had been touched by Martha's story. One woman wrote, "I've lived alone for 10 years, and this is the first time I've felt like someone understands what that's like. Thank you for sharing this." Another commented, "This reminds me of my dad. He's been living by himself since my mum passed, and I don't visit nearly enough. That changes today." The post sparked a movement. People began sharing their own stories of loneliness, of neighbors they'd neglected to know, of family members they'd let slip away. Laura's words became a call to action, challenging others to break the silence that often surrounds those who feel forgotten. Martha, unaware of the growing reach of her story, went about her day quietly, tidying her home and arranging the flowers from her neighbors. But as the days passed, more and more people began to stop by. A young mother brought her children over to introduce them to Mrs. Brown, saying, "I wanted them to meet someone who's lived a life of grace and strength." A retired teacher came by with a book she thought Martha might enjoy, saying, "Your story reminded me of my own. Thank you for inspiring me." Martha found herself at the center of something she never expected. She was no longer just the widow on the corner. She was now the heart of a community that had begun to see each other in new ways. People who had barely spoken before now shared meals, stories, and laughter. The neighborhood that had once felt so fractured was now alive with connection, all because one woman's quiet resilience had been brought to light. But the impact didn't stop there. Laura's post was shared far and wide, reaching people who had never met Martha but who felt her story resonate deeply. Comments continued to flood in. "This reminds me of my neighbor, Mr. Carter. I'm inviting him over for dinner tonight. My grandma has been spending every holiday alone since my grandpa passed. I'm booking a flight to see her next week." This made me realize how much we take each other for granted. Thank you for the reminder to do better. As New Year's Eve approached, People began tagging the post with their own stories of reaching out. Photos of shared meals, handwritten notes to neighbors, and messages of reconciliation with long-lost family members. Martha's story had become a symbol of what was possible when people chose connection over isolation, kindness over indifference. On New Year's Eve, Martha lit her candle once more, as she had every year since Henry's passing. But this time, she wasn't alone. She sat at her table, surrounded by the warmth of letters, flowers, and gifts from neighbors who had once been strangers. Across the street, Laura's home was filled with the sound of her children laughing, her heart full, knowing she had helped spark something beautiful. To everyone watching this story, Martha's journey is a powerful reminder of the difference we can make in each other's lives. New Year's Eve is more than a celebration. It's an opportunity to reflect, to reach out, and to build bridges. Who in your life might be spending this night alone? A neighbor you've never spoken to? A family member who's drifted away? A friend you've been meaning to call? You have the power to change that, to remind them they matter, to make them feel seen, and to start the new year with connection and hope. As we step into 2025, let's commit to creating a world where no one feels invisible. A world where kindness isn't an afterthought, but a daily practice. If Martha's story has moved you, don't let it stop here. Share this video. Comment below with your own stories of connection. Subscribe to join a community of people who believe in the power of kindness and the importance of seeing one another. This new year, let's not just celebrate. We can make it meaningful. Together, we can create a movement of care, compassion, and community, one act of kindness at a time. Because no one should have to face the new year or any day alone. Let's be the change that Martha's story inspires.